Welcome back to Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams. Thank you for joining me live on this emergency broadcast day. As you know, this was going to be a fundraising telethon event today. We had a lot of special guests lined up for you. We kept all those interviews, but the real emergency today is, of course, the breakout of what looks like could escalate into World War III. And there's been a lot of breaking news just over the last few hours today. And my very special guest joining me today is one of the best analysts that I know of, if not the top, who's also a host here on Brighteon.tv. Major Jeffrey Prather joins us now for the most up-to-date analysis of what's happening in the Middle East and where this could lead. Welcome to the show, Major Prather. It's an honor to have you on, sir. I normally don't use your military rank, but I'm using it today. So thank you for joining me.
No, that's fine. That was usually a major pain in the butt to my superiors, so it's fine.
Well, in any case, is it okay if I call you Jeffrey for the remainder of the interview?
It's okay, yes.
Okay. Well, I do want to honor your service and also your knowledge base that you bring to the table here today. Now, just to set the table, and then I'll turn it over to you. We have seen in the last 24 hours, let's say, the U.S. and Israel announcing the deployment of anti-air defense systems, even delaying the ground invasion in order to complete that deployment, which includes the so-called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D systems that, as you know, intercept typically incoming ballistic missiles. That's not a short-range air defense system at all. In addition, Israel has announced, Netanyahu said they now have a date. The invasion date is set. So the U.S. and Israel are absolutely determined to carry out this ground assault on Gaza. Turkey, meanwhile, Erdogan has said that he will get kinetically involved in opposing Israel if that is necessary. And that surprised a lot of people to hear that. The UN is screaming about humanitarian violations on the part of Israel's actions. In addition, Oxfam, the food aid organization, is now accusing Israel of carrying out a starvation genocide campaign by denying food to the Palestinian civilians. And of course, the Arab world is just about up in arms right now. So all the signs seem to be pointing to a significant escalation. And of course, the two carrier groups are within range, and China has at least 2 destroyers within range as well that have hypersonic missiles and so on and so forth. But I'm just trying to set the table. What do you make of this today, Jeffrey, of where we are? Because this is very different from 24 hours ago. What do you think are the most significant realizations right now?
Well, just as you had me on Saturday where I talked about Israel's intentional intelligence failure, that just like our 9/11, this was by design so that Israel could do this. It's not that Hamas hasn't killed civilians and slaughtered kids and women, but that the Israeli government was in on it, just like they were in on via Mossad and Shin Bet and FBI and CIA our 9/11. They are continuing to build this, and this really activates Revelation scripture as well, which calls for a great war in Israel. So now to break down some of the military movements, the carrier groups moving around. The carrier groups move around all the time. That's not really anything significant. I've been in touch with some of my Team America naval personnel, and that is often just a show of force, even though that's how we project force overseas. And one of the definitions of a superpower is that you can run a carrier group, because to run a carrier by itself, much less a carrier group, you have to have systemology. You have to have systems that run systems. And so that narrows that down to really the superpowers there. But as a significant military function, it's not that significant. Just like the missile interceptions, I don't think are that significant as well. The date for the D-Day or Invasion Day should probably be changed because if they were, so all of a sudden now they know where everybody in Hamas is, but all of a sudden they were surprised before. So this goes right along with the intelligence setup of everything, which them announcing this now is again for the purpose of building support for Israel. And you're seeing from Manhattan Beach, California to New Jersey, you're seeing fights breaking out between Nazis and anti-Nazis, between Jews and Christians and Muslims as well. And that is all by design as well. But there's also, I thought you were going to bring up the fact that Colonel McGregor has said that there were Israeli and American special forces that did a reconnaissance into the Strip, and some of them were killed. And that is very interesting, because I have said that there have been American forces in and are in Ukraine. They've been fighting there. There were some reserve groups that were teaching there. Then we had some Ukrainian over in the Oklahoma base. I can't think of the name of it. But there have been covert forces in Ukraine all along. And one of the things I broke with you on Saturday was that a lot of our National Guard armories are out of weapons, and they were going to Ukraine, and they are now going to Israel. And
I want to come back to that point. Please continue, but I want to bookmark that point. It's critical. We'll come back to it.
It is, because what that is likely is those are basically former Special Operations personnel, Delta, Green Beret, SEALs that have been chopped to the CIA's Special Activities Division, ground branch. Normally, that's what you see in 13 hours. Those guys like that, and they did not like doing that, and so they came to me to reveal that. So that's crucial as well. We are being disarmed. We have no ammunition. We have no troops to guard us. Of course, our open border was like the temporary opening of the Israeli border. But more significantly, the story about the Sayeret, and U.S. Army Special Forces or Delta Commandos or whoever it was that went in there, or the Tier 1 Special Operations Intelligence that I was with, I find that very hard to believe as well. Because again, Israel may have the best intelligence in the world, and that border was the most secure and redundant in the world, and it's clear there was a stand down. And Israel has a Special Forces unit, a Sayeret Duvedan unit, that specializes in dressing up as Palestinians in Palestinian garment, infiltrating. It's even so well known that there was even a show on Netflix a while back called Fauda. It wasn't very good, but that's a infamous unit, and they have totally infiltrated them. And of course, the British have supported them. So I find it hard to believe that Israeli Special Forces, along with American Special Forces, would be ambushed like that. I think that is, again, to add to the information influence operation of the 5th generation warfare, the cover of which is the kinetic warfare. And I also, right after I got off the air with you on Saturday and said, I don't see that this is going nuclear, and I talked about that, then there was the announcement that the U.S. is doing nuclear tests. And that Russia just withdrew from the test ban treaty, and again, that is to build the tension and the focus so that they'll have more war. So I think that there's been 3 to 4 SATMs, small atomic demolition munitions, that have tried to be infiltrated into America. My book Chase is about that, but those have been stopped. But I think this scenario is building now. And what other explanation for all of a sudden, for right now, for the U.S. to resume nuclear testing in Nevada? There is no other explanation. This would be, of course, the worst time to do that. But this is to enrage, shake the jar. This is to bring Iran into the fight, too, because Iran is Persia. The Persians are not Arabs. There have always been a division there amongst them as well, which could be exploited. The only Arab country or Middle Eastern country that Obama did not support in the Arab Spring was Iran, because they're tired of being a theocracy. They want Coca-Cola and rock and roll and blue jeans. And the Persians and Arabs, the Sunni and Shia, are a traditional split. So this is antagonizing Iran purposefully as well. At the same time, going to force Egypt's hand into it. The only thing that Carter did well as a president was bring Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat together to a peace deal and destroying that buffer. So to me, this is all being carefully created to create a conflict, an ongoing kinetic conflict to cover up for the war that is being waged by governments on their own people.
Yeah, really critical point that you just made there. This does seem like a cover for the much bigger war, which is a war against all of humanity. And I've made this comparison. Many others have also on this network, that what Israel did as a pilot program to Gaza, which is, big border wall, high security, limited food intake, limited communications, massive surveillance. That is the perfect model for the globalist 15-minute cities that they intend for all of us to be treated that same way. Gaza has been described by many people as an open-air prison, which is not exactly the right description, because in a prison those people have been convicted of something. These people have not been convicted of it. But I understand the allusion to it. But we're all going to be treated as prisoners in prison type of systems. And it's astonishing to me, Jeffrey, that the United States is so willing to jump to the defense of Israel's borders, while of course doing nothing to defend America's borders. And getting back to the point that you said earlier, which is that some National Guard bases in the United States are out of ammo now, having sent virtually everything to either Ukraine or Israel. In some cases, Ukraine then diverted to Israel. But I can't help but think about Sun Tzu, or in Chinese, Sun Tzu, the art of war. I mean, forming the battlefield, that's how you determine who wins the war. And the battlefield of America has been stripped of most of its defenses at this point. How significant is that?
Well, that's very significant. It's not just the ammunition, it's the guns. There are National Guard armories that no longer have any weaponry. And some of the contractors that contacted me said that guns were going to Ukraine and they were diverted to Israel. And that's why they said something about that to me. But I think you're exactly right. I think the 15-minute, because ESG is starting to fail. Everybody's realizing that the race war that they're trying to mimic that's going on in South Africa is failing. So in place of the race war, they're going to have a religious war. And just as MK Ultra was, Ted Kaczynski was kind of the poster child, the experiment for that. Now everybody is being MK Ultra. What they're doing in Gaza is then going to be, when they import, and now all of a sudden the San Diego Intelligence Center, I don't know if you've seen that bulletin, I have, said, hey, there may be Hamas coming in, and the FBI have lost Hamas terrorists coming in. And of course, this is real purposeful, because they will then do what the FBI does with almost all of their terrorism cases, and that there will be some kind of terrorism false flag WMD across the big city. The FBI will stop it, then they will 15-minute that city. That looks like the plan.
Now, as part of that plan, I mean, I've thought through a lot of this as well, what might possibly happen, although, of course, I pray it doesn't. But let's say that some, radicalized terrorist individual that came across the open border with a suicide vest goes into a grocery store somewhere in America, detonates in the grocery store. Just like you said, then the reaction is going to be, well, we have to lock down the grocery stores. All of a sudden, you need to have a passcode to have the door open. You have to scan your phone in order for the door to open for you to get in. And they'll automate this. They don't even need human guards in many cases. They'll automate it. And then it won't be long before the requirements are upgraded to where, oh, you need to have the jabs to get in, or you need to have not said something online that the government doesn't like in order to get in. And all of a sudden, then food is weaponized, or food restrictions are weaponized. And I mentioned Oxfam earlier. They have calculated that the amount of food currently going into Gaza is only 2% of what it was before October 7th on a day-to-day basis. So imagine taking away 98% of the calories of a specific population group, whether that's Gaza today, or maybe, New York City in the future, or Los Angeles or Chicago or whatever. There are mechanisms to do that, and it can all be done under the cover of security. Don't you want to be safe from the terrorists? Well, of course we need to lock down the grocery stores. Of course we can't let people in who might be spreading disease or whatever, right? This kind of thing is not science fiction anymore, is it?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think the scenario you're laying out is exactly correct, and it harkens back to Operation Gothic Serpent, which most people think of as Black Hawk Down, where the warlords were using starvation as a weapon, and it's simply siege warfare. Now, even the Christian, the Muslim turned Christian son of the Hamas leader has said we should lock it down. He was just on Fox, and they asked him, how could this happen? And he didn't let him answer that question. And you're never going to hear that from the American conservative Christian Zionists because they want to go along with this. But he said, hey, we should lock it down, which, of course, they should get out the civilians. Of course, they should close the tunnels, which I doubt they will as well. But then they would have control of that. But they haven't had essential control of this for a long time. They had to make this happen, to make something happen, just as they are having to make this happen in American cities. These American cities where they will do this are feral cities already. And feral is a term now used by SOCOM for cities that the enemies control. Think Fallujah. And think about what happened in Fallujah, too, because I actually was at the Marine Corps Ball years ago. And I bought a bunch of drinks for some Purple-Hearted Marines. And I used to teach the Fallujah scenario at my 5-day pre-deployment course in the TVOC, the Tactical Vehicle Operations course, where the contractors via Rumsfeld had 2 cars and 2 guys. They got lost in Fallujah right after the Marines had done this great civil action program. MARSOC program looks a lot like Special Forces, which is developing rapport with civilians, building good relations, civil affairs, PSYOPs, which I was in. They come in, they're rude, they got their sunglasses and their guns, they mouth off and they get killed, they get chopped up, they get burned and hung from a bridge, and the Marines get the word, hey, go back into Fallujah and level it. Where all you got to do is be respectful to an elder, hand him some money, say, I got to take this bad guy, can I get your permission? And I actually had videos that used to sell in Army Air Force exchange stores on this exact subject of how to do this properly. But the point is, they are doing this intentionally to make this happen so that they can then do it in American cities. But there's a difficulty here, and it's the same difficulty with trying to export the race war from South Africa, because the race war from South Africa is on farms. They're killing white farmers. The race war in America, like the 15-minute cities, is in urban areas. Exporting that to the countryside is going to be very difficult for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, if not impossible. But I'm glad that you mentioned Fallujah. I did want to bring that up because Fallujah is tiny, obviously, compared to the entire Gaza Strip, not to mention just the northern half of Gaza. And I want to ask your assessment of what IDF forces will be facing should they go in there on the ground, given that the terrain has been radically modified by the aerial bombardment. So, as you know, I mean, you're a firearms instructor among your many talents, and you know that by bombing these buildings, they have created incredible opportunities for both concealment and cover for fighters, Hamas or otherwise, who want to stay in the city and engage IDF. I mean, IDF has made their job, in a sense, extremely treacherous, not to mention the tunnels, and not to mention whatever IEDs may have been planted along the way. And Hamas has had how many years to plan that operation? So give us your realistic assessment of what IDF troops are going to be facing the minute they set foot into that environment.
Well, it's going to be a meat grinder. And again, I think it's planned to be that. So back in 1988, when I was in 7th Special Forces, I got to go to the Special Operations Tactic course taught by Delta. It was the blue light course. Blue light stood up before Delta, and they put you in a corner of the room and they said, hey, we're coming through that doorway. Don't leave the tape. And we're like, yeah. And they blow the door, come in, and you've seen that now in movies all the time. Surgical shooting, CQB, close quarter battle. That's a very difficult time of battle because the reaction time is very short, where if you're in open terrain, you can see the enemy, you can see the tanks. When you're clearing close areas like that, where there's lots of debris, the reaction time is very short. It takes a lot of skill to do that, and it's very difficult. And very quickly, they'll run out of troops. and also very quickly there will be troops killed. And I think that's where this story that McGregor is reporting, that I have a hard time buying, that Sayeret and SF or Delta went in there and got killed already. I think that is actually much more likely that is prepping the ground, and that's what you mentioned with Sun Tzu. And of course, always preparing the battlefield, but the primary battlefield is the mind. All the terrain is always human, and the psychological operations, that's what this is all about, prepping that. But yes, to your point, will that terrain be incredibly difficult? Yeah, and there will be a mass drain of Israeli forces in there, which will then likely require other troops, such as American troops.
Oh my!
And then
it goes.
Activates China and Russia and Iran and everybody else.
Yeah, it's almost like at that point, U.S. troops are being sent in there as a form of bait to justify a wider escalation by the Pentagon, because they know there are going to be casualties among those troops, even though they are well trained and well equipped. Let me ask you one other thing. We've got about 3 minutes left before break here. We'll continue on the other side. But the displacement of the 2.3 million Gazans, doesn't this also give an opportunity for Hamas terrorists to pretend to be just regular innocent civilians and to go along with the displaced individuals, potentially to be relocated into the United States, which is what many Democrats are calling for, such as Congressman Jamal Bowman, who pulled the fire alarm, the other day. He wants these Palestinians to be brought and put into U.S. cities. So not only would Israel be eliminating Gazans from that entire strip of land and then claiming it for themselves, they would be pushing most of those people, or many of them, let's say, onto either Egypt, perhaps the Sinai Peninsula, or the United States. And I'm not saying that they're all bad. Clearly, there are innocent civilians in all of this, but there can be easily terror-minded individuals hiding among them who intend to carry out terrorist attacks in the United States because the U.S. is supporting Israel. Does that analysis make sense to you?
Oh, totally. That's why when you bring out hostages, all their hands are up, and when you come into clear room, everybody's hands go up. But there's another story to break here, and that is that Triple Canopy Academy, which was Blackwater, they had to change their name, BlackRock, Constellus, Aegis, are hiring contractors right now, mercenaries, for Middle East deployment. So these are the guys that are going to be sent in there to lead these units, because they're frankly in disarray. It's just like the way the FBI solves all their Muslim terrorism cases. They find some hapless American Muslim teen and they say, hey, are you ticked off at the U.S.? Yeah. You want to blow something up? Yeah. You got explosives? No. Well, here's some fake explosives. You got a plan? No. Well, here's a plan. That's the same thing that I think is now going to happen on steroids. And these contractors will lead those, which some of them will be authentic in that regard. That's why one of the Israeli captives that got back said, my captor was blonde-haired and light-skinned, and that was strange, and couldn't understand why the Israeli police didn't respond quickly. And then the Israelis came in and shot everybody as well. That looks like what this is being set up to be, just as we saw that same thing in Ukraine.
That's a bombshell, what you just said there, and I want to try to unpack that a little bit more on the other side of this break that we have coming up here. Just want to remind everybody watching, this is live, Brighteon.tv. Mike Adams here with Major Jeffrey Prather with real-time analysis of the escalation of events in the Middle East, events that will affect us all. This is not just half a world away. This will impact us all. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break with more from Jeffrey Prather. All right, welcome back. Mike Adams here live on Brighteon.tv with my special guest and also a host here with his own program on Fridays on Brighteon.tv, Major Jeffrey Prather. And this is real-time analysis of the escalating war in the Middle East. And things are happening in real time right now that will affect each and every one of us in ways that most people aren't tracking. So if you're watching this, you're getting a glimpse of what's coming in a way that most people will not have access to. So keep watching. We're going to go to Jeffrey Prather next. Let me set up the next question, which is that the ground assault on Gaza has been delayed so that the U.S. can deploy additional air defense systems. However, at the same time, it's pretty well known that Hezbollah has at least 100,000 rockets. I've heard estimates much higher, maybe 200 or more thousand. And those are unguided rockets, of course, kind of crude rockets, fire and forget, shotgun blast. However, because southern Lebanon, Lebanon is adjacent to Israel, those rockets can do an extensive amount of damage to Israeli infrastructure, just the sheer number of those rockets. So 2 questions for you. Number one, can the U.S. air defense systems have any real effect on stopping those incoming rockets, or what might they be able to stop? Iran's medium-range missiles, perhaps, guided missiles? What about hypersonic missiles? And then secondly, what happens if Hezbollah is successful, from their point of view, of turning Israel's infrastructure to rubble in the way that Israel is turning Gaza's infrastructure to rubble, i.e. taking out Israeli communications infrastructure, roads, water systems, by the way, which are very scarce, as you know, in that region right now, but also electrical substations and so on. They could plunge Israel into a situation that makes it extremely difficult for logistics to succeed with the IDF or whatever U.S. forces are involved. So those are my 2 questions for you. We'll start with that.
Well, the first thing is that planners always make the same mistake. They always think that bombing lowers resistance, when actually the opposite is true. And that is true except for the fact of nuclear war. And of course, America is the only country that's ever waged a nuclear war on civilians. But that was really a psychological effect. And let me talk about that for a second. But people always think if you bomb them, then they'll give up. And actually, the reverse is always true, because as things get more primitive, as things go tribal, people neighbor up and they shore each other up. And of course, the big example of this is London, where London decided to sacrifice London to save the RAF planes that were moved out, and they bombed London. Out of this comes the London Resistance. It comes C.S. Lewis. All of this building resistance. You see this over and over with the North Vietnamese, wherever. So the destruction in the Gaza has not lessened resistance; it has built resistance. And attacking the Israeli infrastructure will also do the same thing. Where will our air defense systems work? Well, I'm not an ADA guy, but the short answer is no. I think because our technological systems are failing over and over. The example of the F-35, where it can only fly half the time because the systems are so complicated, where Hamas, you're right, does fire unaimed missile systems. That was always the Soviet philosophy too, is just obliterate a grid square, where American artillery and indirect fire, whether it's naval gunfire or even mortars, were always extremely precise. Those were 2 different strategies of looking at doing that. And so will they be able to stop that? No, I don't think so. I don't even think they'll be able to stop it with American support, but it will shore up the military-industrial complex along with the pharmacological, biological media complex, because there are now naval guns that can fire bioweapons from, I think, about 12 miles out, inserting bioweapons as well. And that's really the real war. The directed energy weapons, the bioweapons, the CRISPR technologies, that's really where the real focus is. The kinetic war, while tragic and bloody and really killing people, is a managed and controlled and enacted war, as we've talked about earlier.
Well, you talk about 5th generation warfare, all the different facets of war, and I know that you've covered the fact that one of those is famine, engineered famine, starvation. And, I mentioned earlier that, of course, food restriction is very severe right now against Gaza. Only 2% of the previous food supplies are currently allowed in. So that's clearly creating famine. But on a global scale, there is, even my broadcast today was entitled "The Global Holodomor," referring to, of course, Ukraine's in the 1930s, the mass starvation by the Soviet Union at the time of millions of Ukrainians by just forcing them to have no food and killing them through starvation. But there's an element of this that's taking place internationally with, for example, in Europe, in the Netherlands, shutting down farms, saying they have to do it for the climate. But also India has banned its rice exports, for example, many months ago, and they're responsible for about 40% of the rice, the white rice, in any case, exports around the world. You've got also, geoengineering and crop failures that experts like Dane Wigington have chimed in on. And so whatever Israel and the Middle East go through right now, and Gaza and the Palestinians and so on, it's going to be exacerbated by the fact that food scarcity and then probably soon energy scarcity, which feeds even more into failed farming operations and so on. It's going to be much more difficult for any wartime nations or displaced individuals to acquire food. How do you think that is going to play into everything that you're seeing, including potentially Iran or Turkey and other nations, especially in the Middle East, that tend to depend on a lot of food imports from other nations?
Yeah, well, the Holodomor analogy is very important because Ukraine has the black soil farmlands, the borderlands, where they've done so much feeding. They're almost as good at it as America has been. But again, I think the real plan here is to continue to divide up, as Ukraine is being divided up by Monsanto, the Eastern Providence going to Russia. Everybody takes their piece. I think the same thing is going to happen in America as they plant these Nazis, these terrorists, and the government comes in to put in their 50-minute cities. But the difficult part is to control the farmlands. And I think that's why, and the real expert, we both had him on, Michael Yan, on this, former Special Forces and famine expert as well, is talking about all of the military-age fighting men coming across the border. And I think that is to control the fields and control the nodes. But there's another aspect to go back to of the warfare where you're talking about air defense artillery and rockets and everything. But if you look to Ukraine and Russia, to the kinetic war that Russia is clearly winning, they were winning, they will win, they are winning, is the drone warfare and miniature swarm drone warfare is going to change that whole picture as well. Yes. And that's going to be applied because those are inexpensive and that can be applied to that warfare as well. So, we ship some tanks over there and the tanks haven't lasted long because the tanks are for the old Fulda Gap strategy. Right. Hey, the Ruskies are coming across the Fulda Gap and we're going to have tank warfare like Patton, and it's no longer that. Warfare has moved on from that. Again, that's why I come back to this is kinetic war, while tragic and bloody, is really a show war for the real war of do weapons and bio weapons as well. And the old weapon systems are just not going to cut it. They're just not going to work. But they will when it results in terrorist attacks that are set up, like the FBI always sets them up in various cities, will then seal off certain cities while military-age fighting men control trucks, trains, ports, and container ships. Yes. To ensure market for the Kabbalist, the transnational corporate cartels.
Well, and all of these police state type of actions will be justified by saying it's for your safety. And right. Frankly, most of the people will be so terrified that they will beg for the government to come in and control their cities for their safety. I said this years ago and people couldn't believe it. I said, when the day comes that you're living under a police state, understand that 9 out of 10 of your neighbors will have begged for it. And you can see exactly, how that's coming about. But you mentioned drones, and I think this is really critical. You're right. This changes the battlefield substantially, and swarms of micro drones. First of all, our audience needs to understand that Iran is a major manufacturer of drone technology. And Iran has, of course, provided drones to Russia, which have been very effective against Ukraine. Now, Russia has its own drones as well, such as the Lancet 3 with anti-tank, ordnance on it. But Iran is very sophisticated in drone technology. And I always bring people back to under Barack Obama. there was the so-called capture of a U.S. drone that landed in Tehran that was able to be reverse engineered by Iranian engineers. And I believe that happened on purpose. I don't think it was a GPS spoofing accident. I don't think it was, the Iranians took it over. No, I think Obama ordered that sucker landed right there to give it to the Iranians. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but either way, it's okay. But Iran has drone technology. In addition, and I like your comments on this, there is economic asymmetry in this. You really kind of mentioned it. You can send in a $5 million tank, a Leopard 2, let's say, I don't know what it costs, maybe it's $5 million, and it can be destroyed with a $50,000 drone. So we're talking orders of magnitude difference in the economic investment required to achieve the elimination of the enemy's hardware. That means that a superpower that can print unlimited amounts of money no longer has a strong economic advantage on the battlefield because of the asymmetry that I just described. What are your thoughts on this, Jeffrey?
No, I agree with that totally. And you don't even have to attack the enemy's forces. You attack the enemy's infrastructure. And infrastructure, by its very nature, is always vulnerable. Water supplies, food, all of that. And the drone and I do agree with you that Obama, just like he sent the planes, the unmarked planes with all the cash on them to Iran, people forget that the Iran hostages, the Marines had barred the doors, and the State Department guys opened the doors for the bad guys to come in. The Marines had gotten it under control, the Marine Embassy guards as well. But beyond that big drone, are the smaller swarm drones that we haven't really seen much of, that we're going to see more of. But I think the balloons are signatures of swarm drones, because the problem with the swarm drones or swarm bots is deployment. And so you have to have a slower platform to get them off of. And I think a lot of the times where we see these balloons, because there is low level fire, there's direct fire, there's direct indirect fire, naval gunfire to mortars. Then there's space weaponry with DEWs and and missiles. There's hypersonic missiles, but there's an interim space there where they have not really dominated the battlefield, and that's where I think the balloons come in, and I think that's where the swarm bots come in. And again, that is low budget stuff that is easily done, that can easily be used by Hamas and PLO and Iranian forces as well. And the systems have not developed to counter any of that stuff yet. They have not figured that out.
Yeah, and at the same time, of course, China is the most well-positioned industrially to mass produce those drones. I mean, they produce most of the world's drones as it is, even from toys, to professional drones and even, of course, military drones for their own military. But they can mass produce on a scale that just dwarfs the United States. I was shocked to find out the other day, I think it was a Bloomberg analysis that concluded that China has something like a 232 times more naval output capability in terms of manufacturing naval vessels compared to the United States. And they were comparing, dry dock capabilities, the number of ships that can be produced and so on. China outpaces the U.S. by hundreds of times right now, which means, the more time goes on, the more China will have a lot more naval vessels than the United States. Now, and I know, Jeffrey, that Chinese aircraft carriers are not the same as U.S. aircraft carrier. It's not apples and apples here, right? There's a difference in projection of force, but the sheer numbers of what China can produce are absolutely, they should be alarming if China decides to enter in any of this conflict, including, by the way, rolling up with ships on the West Coast off the port of LA, opening up the top of 40-foot containers and launching swarm bots right there to take out, coastal targets. I mean, that can happen.
Well, you're right. The Chinese carriers have always had problems. We used to make fun of them. They'd catch on fire. But our Navy has really degraded. They're not very capable anymore. It's not the World War II Navy that was willing to go in harm's way, and Nimitz and Halsey and just really ballsy Navy commanders and sub-commanders that would invade Japan. And that Navy no longer exists. It's the tranny Navy now. But the real thing here is the production level, because you're going to lose platforms. That's just what happens in warfare. And in naval warfare, you usually slug it out until something sinks. That's just the nature of the warfare, whether it's surface, subsurface, or naval aircraft. So that is a really important factor for that, that they can produce stuff. But I don't see them rolling up to America, because their unrestricted warfare doctrine, which has been exercised through their Thousand Talents program, has worked very, very well. Where I see this happening is in other resource areas, such as Africa. Africa is the new Afghanistan. Wherever there are resources, that's where the battles are really happening now. And that's what you've seen Putin and Russia maneuvering very, very quickly and for a long time consistently to be able to hold on to scarce resources. And China is trying to catch up with that because Africa is a big producer. China is all over South America as well. In my day, it was the Sendero Luminoso, the Mao shining path Maoists we were running across in South America, which were kind of an anomaly. But China's all over South America now. They're all over Africa. And it's about taking control of resource regions while they also take control of resource regions inside America to use siege warfare, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's in America.
Absolutely. Now, I'm looking up something here. I want your reaction on this, because you mentioned F-35s earlier, and there's been a report coming out of various alternative media talking about the shooting down of an enormous number of Ukrainian aircraft just in the last few days. Perhaps you've seen this, and it seems to be credited to a hypersonic long-range air-to-air missile known as the R-37M that is now deployed on Russian interceptors, essentially. Apparently, 17 Ukrainian MiG-29s have been brought down, 3 transport helicopters, it goes on, tactical bombers, air support jets, and so on. And apparently, from what is being reported, this long-range air-to-air missile has a potential range of 400 kilometers, which is, of course, the U.S. Has nothing that matches that. That would mean that in addition to the F-35's existing problems that you've already alluded to, the F-35s, unless their stealth technology always works, which it doesn't always work, they would be sitting ducks from Russia to stand off beyond about 200 kilometers and launch these missiles to take out F-35s. Do you think this is, have you heard anything about this? Does it sound legit or does it sound exaggerated? What's your take?
Yeah, it sounds legit. And I think that's true because Americans are in love with technology as opposed to training. And we're always more sophisticated than anything that we create. The creator that created us as creatures makes us more sophisticated than any creation of the creators ever, whether it's a microscope or a telescope or a rifle or a missile. And the more complicated the system, the more difficult to use under combat conditions. And also, when we're talking about Russia and China, you've got to understand the way they fight. So America thinks about fighting precisely with scalpel strikes. That's not how Russia and the Chinese fight. Because of the nature of their countries, they just throw people at it, and they let the terrain. And anybody who wants to invade Russia or China, they let the terrain kill them. And everybody, and that's the same thing with Afghanistan as well. And so the resistance to counter all of that, where they can continue to produce that, becomes crucial. That they just can't do that. Now, China has the people; it doesn't have the resources to do that. Because they'll run out of, you always have to have 3/4 more tail to support the teeth of the operation. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. Russia does, however. And again, Russia hasn't even really gotten into any real fight like in World War II, where they lost, by my estimate, most people say 25 to 30, I say 45 to 60 million. The same thing though, but as Russia and China and Iran get into this fight, these are big powers with big armies. And it's not about the sophisticated weaponry, which will be taken out one way or another. It's about the basic weaponry and the basic soldiers and the basic ammunition that they can continue the fight. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon with all of this. And that really favors China and Russia and Iran and not America.
Yeah, along those lines, and I just mentioned that air-to-air missile that is hypersonic. I believe it flies at about Mach 6. But the Russia, of course, has the Kinzhal missiles. You've reported on this. All of us have, that can reportedly fly even faster than that. I don't know if it's Mach 9 or what the final number is, but reportedly the U.S. or NATO has no real effective defense against those missiles. Now, the Kinzhal missiles can be equipped with nuclear warheads. I'm not sure the yield size on those, but even 15 kilotons, that's Hiroshima-sized yields, and that could certainly fit on those missiles, maybe larger. To your knowledge, does the U.S. Navy have any system of defense that can stop these hypersonic missiles? And Iran has its own hypersonics, not as sophisticated as Russia's, but they do possess them. Can anything stop a nuclear missile from being detonated right on top of the USS Ford, for example?
I think that they're laser systems, and there are laser systems on ships. There are directed energy weapons in Air Force aircraft, and in satellites may be their answer to that. But as far as a kinetic system, I don't know of one. But I'm certainly not, an artillery guy, and mass-sent missiles intelligence is not my area, my specialty area by any means. But there's another point here, and that is, when you're going to deploy weapon systems like this, you have to deploy them. You only have so many of those. So these are very expensive, complicated weapon systems. Therefore, there's a finite amount of them. So you have to deploy them where you need them, because you're going to run out of them. So you have to use those in your plan, in your war plan. What are you trying to accomplish? And so that's the fallacy of Ukraine, is they're just throwing Ukrainians and weapons and tanks into the Russian meat grind. It doesn't go anywhere. So if you're trying to invade someplace, then you want to take out the air defenses so that you can then have air superiority, so that you can then breach, so that you can take key nodes. You might drop your paratroopers, but you've got to check out those resources where you're going to use them. Again, Eisenhower on D-Day had to commit the paratroopers to take the bridges, even though he expected 75% casualties. It turned out to be 25%, but he goes, "We got to do it." But there's no plan here other than endless war and throw them into the meat grinder. Those systems, F-35s, hypersonic missiles, they will go quickly by the wayside, as everything else has, and it will no longer be that anymore at all.
Okay, and we're almost out of time here, and I also just want to add that the industrial capability of the United States to replace these systems is very, very limited right now, and global supply chains are not working. But Major Jeffrey Prather, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real honor to have your analysis here. I hope people listen carefully and also join your show on Fridays here on Brighteon.tv. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thanks for having me. This is really important.
All right, thank you all for watching. Mike Adams here. Stay tuned. More shows through 9 p.m. Eastern right here on Brighteon.tv. Thank you for all your support of our platforms and healthrangerstore.com. And we have a new certified organic product that is very practical and important right now, given world events. It is a certified organic version of our nascent iodine. And here it is, nascent atomic iodine, our Groovy Bee brand, and it's made with certified organic glycerin. So of course, iodine itself, being an element, can't be organic or inorganic. I mean, the organic certification doesn't make sense when talking about just an element, just iodine. But the glycerin, which is the bulk of what's in this product, and it makes it very delicious to taste, by the way. It's, iodine can be pretty harsh when it's in alcohol, and iodine itself can taste, pretty wild. In this glycerin format, at the right concentration, and it's organic glycerin, it's very easy to take. People love this formulation. And it's also easy for children to take, and even where appropriate for animals you can mix it in with their food very easily in this way. No alcohol, and the glycerin is all organic. So this is the nascent atomic iodine formulation available now at healthrangerstore.com. Here's the 3-pack. We've got it available in different quantities. And believe me, as things start to really pop off in the Middle East, everybody's going to want to have the additional protection of iodine for, thyroid support, among other purposes. And I use iodine for a number of applications, including, I use it topically, but I use the alcohol version for topical applications. This with the glycerin is best for oral ingestion. Just use it as directed. Iodine is a heavy element, which means you can overdose on it, so don't go chugging bottles of iodine. That would be crazy. It's always a good idea to check with your naturopathic practitioner of how much iodine is appropriate for you. Maybe they can check your levels and determine how much that you need on an ongoing basis. It's not much. It's, micrograms per day, technically, is all that a human being needs in terms of iodine. But if you're not getting it from other sources, i.e., if you're not eating a lot of seaweed, then you're probably not getting much iodine in your diet like Japanese do. Because they eat so much seaweed, they get a lot of natural iodine. But for most of us, we don't get much. Even the iodized salt is only given enough iodine to just barely prevent obvious diseases caused by iodine deficiency. So iodine supplementation can be very, very beneficial. And this is the first form we've ever had available that is the nascent atomic iodine in a certified organic, USDA organic format. And it's also lab tested in our laboratory to make sure it doesn't contain the heavy metals, glyphosate, microbiology. I don't even see how microbes could live in this substance, by the way. But we do all the testing, so we have all the internal lab certifications for safety in addition to all the label claims and the organic certification as well. So check it out at healthrangerstore.com. Get yourself prepared. This will be a really powerful barter item as well, depending on what takes place next in the Middle East or elsewhere, maybe involving Russia, who knows. This will be a very valuable barter item to have, probably better than cash, at least for anybody who knows the value of iodine. And we will be completely blown out of this when events start to happen. We don't price gouge, so we're not going to make the price 10 times higher as some operators do. Instead, we'll just sell everything at the same current price, but it'll be sold out very, very quickly, and it'll be a long time before we'll be able to get additional iodine, once world events take place. We may never get iodine, depending on what happens. We'll see. We'll do our best to bring it to you. But thank you for your support. Again, healthrangerstore.com.
A global reset is coming, and that's why I've recorded a new 9-hour audiobook. It's called The Global Reset Survival Guide. You can download it for free by subscribing to the naturalnews.com email newsletter, which is also free. I'll describe how the monetary system fails. I also cover emergency medicine and first aid and what to buy to help you avoid infections. So download this guide. It's free. It's my gift to you simply because I want like-minded people to survive.